Okay, so recording has started. It also says transcription has started, which is brand new. So we will see how that works out. I've done the closed captioning on Teams meetings before, and sometimes it's really fun to see what word it thinks you've said. And if I recall correctly, it does bleep out swears. So if anyone swears, it will just give symbols. And so welcome to the, let me turn, oh, it gave me a transcription pane. Okay, welcome to the November Interlibrary Loan Roundtable. Let me admit a couple more people. And today I thought we would start with the topic of patron-initiated requests because I've gotten some questions about it. So I was hoping to hear from people about what works for them, why they're using it, why they're not using it. And if anyone had questions on how to implement it or get it started at their library. I know there are some libraries that use it. Some only have specific patrons that have the privilege of doing patron-initiated requests. And we haven't started using patron-initiated requests for state employees, but it's something I've been thinking about. So I was hoping to hear about other people's experiences. And then at the end of the meeting, I was going to see if there were any other interlibrary loan topics or questions anyone had. And I did get some written feedback from people that I'm happy to share about any benefits or drawbacks from patron-initiated requests. So who wants to go first? Or should I just start out with the feedback I was sent and we'll go from there?
Sounds good.
Okay, I'll start out. I was very excited because it opened with benefits. So what I have heard from some librarians is that some patrons are highly skilled in requesting items, and she double checks their work, but the work is usually really good, so they just change it to approved send, and the request goes out, and it's tracked through the usual systems in Clover. She also wrote that patron-initiated requests allow patrons to request interlibrary loans while not being physically at the library. They don't have to go to the library. They don't even have to interact with staff. They can just search Clover and request, and they don't have to call or email. So it streamlines the process for the patrons a bit. And she also really liked that staff have the final approval before the request goes out to patron or out to Clover. So it can be canceled or deleted, and then you can just send an email to the patron explaining why. I mean, maybe it was something that was already owned and they just missed it. And if the patron chooses a solid record in Clover, then it saves the staff time looking for that item. And she also said that her Clover is configured mainly to courier libraries. So that helps bring up more viable records as opposed to maybe one that's only owned by one library or has a rogue ISBN, so the lender list bills oddly. Should I move into the drawbacks, or do we want to talk about the benefits more?
Well, I was going to say that during shutdown, well, COVID, once we were able to do interlibrary loans again, that homeschoolers, especially patrons, used the request, patron-initiated requests, and that worked out. So it's just so much less work for us staff, especially if the search is a good search, So I really, really like it. Anyway, so I think it's a great benefit, especially now, And we also, when a patron, we have these forms for patrons to fill out to make requests, when they're physically present at the library. And it just alleviates like all that loose paper stuff is gone. I really like that. So anyway, it's worked well for us.
And do you have it for all your patrons, or do you just have it set for the select few?
No, it's for all our patrons. And that's one of the reasons I came to this meeting. I would like to promote the service. And we haven't created it yet, but I thought about creating like a little spreadsheet, something that people could follow. We could hand out, put it on the brochure we hand people, to ask us about patron-initiated requests. But I need to get organized around it, and I haven't done that. And I was hoping maybe somebody else had done some work and would be willing to share.
This is Renee at Ilsley, and I joined late. We're talking about patrons putting in their own interlibrary loan requests. So am I on the right topic? Okay,
Yes.
good. So we have a link right on our website, and it's request an ILL, and then you go in and it takes them right into the Clover system. And there's also a link on our website that takes you to instructions, step-by-step instructions on how to do it. And I print those out once in a while, and I have a couple of them next to the public computers as well. And I would say 95% of the patrons that use my library that ask for interlibrary loans place their own. It's the rare few that either don't understand how to do it or simply just don't want to do it. And they generally just come to me. Anybody at the desk can do it for them. We've got it set up so you can just do it while you're standing at the desk. But because I know it can get busy at the desk, and my desk is right behind the circulation desk, they usually then just come around the corner to me and I help them.
Now our ILS system has patron-initiated holds already enacted on it. And so is there a way that you have, does your ILS allow that? Because what I'm worried about is letting a patron go to the ILS first before having searched our catalogue properly, because that would create more work for us, because then when we're checking it, we have to backpedal and put on the holds in our system and things like that. So that's what I would be worried about.
It doesn't. I thought Clover automatically didn't let you place it pops up. If a patron makes a request for a title that my library owns, then when I open the request manager every day and approve those to go to the next one, it tells me that this person has requested a title that I own. Mm-hmm. And then I will check that and see 9 times out of 10 it's missing, although COA usually doesn't flag missing ones, or there's a long wait list and the person is in a book group or something like that, and then I'll decide on a case-by-case basis whether I'm going to go ahead and put the request through. But I would say that happens a handful of times in a year.
Is that true for a single library, or is it also true in a consortium setting?
I'm not sure about the consortium setting. I think it only does for items that are marked as owned by your library. So that would be a problem.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I might be able to shed some light on the consortium setting. It depends which consortium you're in. Catamount is a strong believer in patrons being able to order their own stuff. Vocal is not. It's one of the distinctions between the two of us, using otherwise pretty much the same software. And to control some of it, the default setting is it shows items from your own library. And if you want to see more, whether you're certainly on the patron side, and that's a choice you can make on the staff side, but on the patron side, it's been a default for quite a while now. So you search, you find it in your home library, or you don't, and if you don't, then you can move on and search all libraries. So the default is, do we have it here? And if we don't, then it moves on to the next step. And then for us, because of the consortium, the third step becomes Clover. So we do a lot of interlibrary loans. We do a lot more consortial loans, and I'm strongly in favor of it.
Sorry, I'm also taking notes on this. So yes, patron-initiated lending is definitely more complicated if you are in a consortia that lends amongst itself. It is helpful, I think more helpful if you are in a non-consortia lending as well. But I could see if there are any other options to limit things in Clover that would make it more streamlined for consortia, but I'm not sure there is. Does anyone else have any?
Well, just so we're clear, we don't have Clover enabled for the public. We do for the consortium, so they're welcome to do the ordering themselves within the consortium, which is about 85% of our loans that go between libraries. About 85% of those are consortium. And then if the consortium doesn't have it, if nobody in the consortium has it, then the staff takes over with Clover. But we do not have Clover enabled for public view anywhere in our system because we really want people to start with the consortium.
So you have patron-initiated lending within the consortium, but not in Clover.
Yes.
And we don't see, at the moment, I don't see a way of ensuring that the patron goes through the consortia, first of all, before moving on to Clover.
Right.
Which is why we stop and then make it staff initiated after that.
That makes sense.
In the college library system, we get requests that are an automatic feed form from students, staff, and faculty, and then we have interlibrary loan staff that then look at the VSC to see, I mean, obviously we look at our own library first, and then we look to the VSC to see if it's owned in the VSC, and then we go outside of that either to Clover or to PASA to fill a request beyond that point. Because we serve a lot of remote students, the way that it's designed is that everybody just submits their request online and we process it from there.
That's what we do in Rockingham as well. We have online request forms if people are not in the library, and then we process it in Clover. Virgil's not here today. He's out on leave, but he had talked to me about this issue about the patron-initiated requests. And at this point, I don't think Rockingham is planning to do it, but we're listening to see what everybody has to say.
All right. It sounds like there's
Oops. We're a slightly different bird because we have to, and maybe the publics do too, in terms of like, we have to validate that whoever is making the request is current in our system, either as a student, staff, or faculty, before we fill that request. And you probably might, I don't know, you might not have to do the same, like if they have to log in with a current card. I'm not sure, like sometimes we have this lag time between somebody not being current, but their login still works, so they can still make requests, but they really shouldn't be getting any materials.
It depends on how it's set up in Clover. Some have SIP2 enabled, which will automatically connect to the catalog or to the ILS and check that the patron is able to do this. And then others upload the data for their patrons, which means that they need to go back and manually take out anyone who has expired.
This is Jennifer from Richmond. A question for the folks who use forms. What kind of forms are you using for patrons submitting sort of general requests that you then enter in? Is it like Google Forms maybe? I'm guessing for the university, you guys probably have some system through the university. I'm just curious what kind of forms people are using.
Yeah, we created our forms through PASA, our lending system, and linked it. So when someone signs in, it goes to, we have 3 different form options. It's like books, video, or other, I believe. And it's not perfect. We definitely have issues with, I think, no, it's books, articles, or other. We have issues with somebody not selecting the correct tab. And so it alters how the form fills out, and then we have to like go to them and get the missing information sometimes. It just depends on which tab gets defaulted to. So it's not perfect, but it works most of the time, which is pretty good for technology in my opinion, if it's working most of the time. It's working most of the time.
Right. And Tenzin at Fletcher Free also said that they do not have access for patrons in Clover to request, but they do have a request form on their website. We also use a request form, and it's just a web form that we built in our website. It's not the best. It's kind of a clunky form. So typically people, I do the request for state employees, so they just email me.
So then you have to manually put it in.
Yes. My favorite is when someone copies from, like some state employees have figured out how to search in Clover. They don't have accounts, so they can't do their own requests, but they copy, part of the record and paste that in and email it to me. Then I have to figure out maybe where it was from. But yeah, I have some that I would trust to do their own requesting with my final approval, but there's others I think it would take a little more training.
April, this is just a side question. So do the books get shipped, or are you guys part of a courier delivery process for employees?
We're on the courier. Oh, for state employees?
Yeah.
Well, we receive the books by courier or USPS, but then for state employees, some departments are served by interdepartmental pink mail, but not
Gotcha.
all of them. And then less of them now because BGS didn't have enough people to maintain all of the stops they were doing. So I also have some employees that are still working from home all the time. So typically I end up having to email them and ask them where they want it sent to. And then we either send it through regular USPS, through interdepartmental mail, or I send it directly to them at home. There's some that live nearby, so I just arrange times for them to stop by and pick it up. That's where it gets more complex.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess one of my biggest concerns is whether people really can choose a good record, because sometimes, that can be challenging, especially right now with this issue of the zeros popping up everywhere. It's a lot of like clicking through and sorting. And I found like, especially with certain items like DVDs are really challenging because first, even the search function doesn't seem to work quite as well. And then like they all have like separate records, and it just can be like really hard to, and especially if you are on the courier and you want them to choose a library that's also on the courier. So like with the DVD in particular, you really have to get into the correct record. Otherwise it just won't. And so I guess that's my biggest concern is I spend a lot of time looking for that correct record. And I imagine that a patron who doesn't have the experience or interest is just going to click whatever,
Yeah.
Right. And the DVDs have always been very tricky.
This is Lisa Norwich. We have been using Patron-initiated for a long time, and I'd say that now we can pretty much see, to your comment, Jennifer, that if people are just looking for regular books or popular books, we can just pass those along. But it's the DVDs or the books often in series. So it's allowed us to see that most things we can, maybe 3/4 of the things we can just push through, especially once we feel secure in knowing the patrons who are asking, and then devote like much more attention to the other quarter that are like either DVDs or especially juvenile books in series. So. But our patrons, those that use it, have loved it. So
I'm curious about errors.
that makes sense.
Go ahead. I was just curious about errors that occur when patrons do request the wrong thing. Is that common or very uncommon?
It's common. I would say it's more uncommon than common. But again, DVDs is it's a huge issue. And occasionally patrons choose the wrong format when they've wanted something. But I'd say, again, it's probably only really about a quarter of the ones of the patron-initiated requests that I feel like I have to pay good attention to, and sometimes delete theirs and do a staff-initiated one.
I have to say that it's not just Clover that has that problem. Patrons get the format incorrect. They'll have an audio book turn up and say, "Oh, I wanted the book," or vice versa.
Yeah.
So it will happen no matter where, I'm sure.
I thought that Clover automatically, like when you're in there and you choose, you got the right record, so you're in the right book. But I thought that Clover automatically sent it to, it was in our settings about that, our request, that I didn't have to pay attention to which of the ones that I was clicking on once I was sure I had the right format and the right title, and that Clover would automatically send it to first a courier and then, down the list from there. And do I have that correct, or am I completely off base?
No, it does do that. The problem comes if the ISBNs don't match up. It builds the lender list based on the control number. So for books, it goes to the ISBN first. And if there's no ISBN in that record, or it's a very specific edition and very few people have it, it will not pull in other editions.
I see.
So, which is where my complaint with Autographics in their any edition is acceptable checkbox. And I asked them why it was there. And they said, well, if the library has another edition, they'll send it. I said, but it doesn't go to anyone with another edition. So it will pull in anything that matches that control number. If there is no ISBN in the record, it will match based on title and author. And sometimes, especially in series, the titles are entered differently by different libraries.
Right.
So it leans very heavily on matching cataloging at that point. So yes, but it will put the courier libraries first. But if it happens to be a record that, one courier library has this one specific edition, it will move them first. But if they say no, then it's going to move outside of courier libraries.
Well, I do a fair amount of getting books into Ilsley for our patrons. And I would say that the level of attention to detail that you guys are talking to is not where my head has been at. And I've been doing it for 3 years now, and not a problem. So just a plug for, yes, we're librarians and we love detail, but you can probably let a little bit slide once in a while.
I was going to just agree with Renee that we have had very few problems, and any of the problems we have had have been mainly children's book series. And that was, that was an issue, but I think it would have been an issue even if we had started the search from the start. So, yeah, I really like it. And I think once the more patrons are experienced with it, the better they get too. So, it's easier for them to use. I really like the service. And I'm just going to put a shout out if anyone has any information for patrons on patron-initiated requests in Clover and would like to share it. I would love to see that. Would save me some time. Thank you.
I can send my the how-to that we have in a PDF format to you guys, or to and you can disseminate it.
Yes, we have a tutorial too. So should we should send those to you, April?
Yeah, if everyone wants to send them to me, I'll send them out when I send the meeting recording and summary.
Right.
I have a question. This is Susan from Peacham about folks who are doing patron-initiated requests. Have any of you imported your patrons, or do you just add them as people ask?
I have not imported anything. They sign in. We teach them how to sign in as a patron. And then, so they're logged into Clover under their card and password. And then when it comes to, if I have to initiate it, you know, most of them are repeats, right? You're either an ILLer or you're not. So they're in the system, but I have not imported anything.
So I don't need to go in and create a user account for them. They can log in with their number and it's automatically created?
It depends. Libraries where they can just automatically log in have SIP2 enabled, so it will vary from library to library. If you are in Vocal, you automatically have SIP2 enabled.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And there are steps. If you have SIP2 enabled, it means that when you click the request button, it pops up with a window that has two tabs, and it says Share It Login or ILS Login. And if you are doing a request for a first-time patron, then you use ILS Login and you look up their barcode, and it will pull their information directly into Clover. Or if you want them to place the request, they just have to go to Clover and type in their barcode and their PIN number, and it will log them in.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. It's Denise from Heartland. So we have had patron-initiated ILLs for a while. We haven't had a lot of patrons use it, but those who have seem to be perfectly fine. They've been choosing pretty good records. I really like that that option for patrons. The people who have used it, it's gone very well. Now, when they submit a request, it comes to me, and then I either approve it and send it, or have the option to cancel it. Is that something that libraries opt in or out, or is that always how it is? Does every library have that, where they're the gatekeeper before it gets sent out to the system?
That is the default setting.
Okay, thank you.
I think there might be a way to bypass that, but nobody has asked me to find out how to yet. So
No, yeah, I definitely would not want to. I just wasn't sure if everybody also had that as well. Yeah, I would never want a patron to be able to totally initiate on their own. Okay.
all right. So I'm gonna go over some of the complications or drawbacks that were sent to me. That way we'll have a solid overview. So the complications that they sent were staff have the final approval before the request is sent to other libraries. So depending on staffing levels, the request might sit a while. And before approval, staff still investigate the viability of the chosen record. And if it's not a good record, then they have to cancel it and start over. And then also staff need to verify and send the requests in Clover, but also they write it on a paper form because they're still a paper form based library. So that may not apply to everyone because not everyone is using paper forms anymore. And if they do forget to fill out their paper form, then they have to reconstruct it later, which can take some investigating. They also said that patrons sometimes get confused and use the request form to submit new requests to purchase or to send multiple requests for a purchase through there. And sometimes they get impatient about their copy being in process and try to order a brand new ILL because their copy is not ready yet. And they said that sometimes means that staff across different departments have to coordinate in case that patron is sending, emails to multiple people, and it might get things crossed and they might order something multiple times. And if they are in Catamount, it said they may not be checking it as readily for these patron requests, but I don't think there's many in Catamount that are also letting patrons do requests this way, just because it's already a consortia. And that might be it. And occasionally they have patrons request items that they already own, but if they do that, it's flagged when you review the request. So it seems like generally people have had pretty good experiences. Has anyone tried patron-initiated requests and it just went horribly and you will never ever try it again? Randall said that the patron request in Catamount goes straight into the system and it goes through the hold function. It has very few problems, and sometimes people request too many at once. So it sounds like it's going very well through Catamount.
Well, and that's why we try to steer people into Catamount instead of Clover, because, and nothing against Clover, but if it's in Catamount, it's one button ordering for us directly out of our ILS. We find the record, or the patron finds the record, they hit the hold button and away they go.
Right.
And then for anything else, it's multiple steps. And if it's not in Clover, then it's, paper forms, and see if Massachusetts has it. So if we can do it in Catamount, it's a huge savings of time and energy from our standpoint, and the patrons really like it. I mean, when I came on at the start and I said, I really am in support of this, I'm in support of it because our patrons love it, and our requests have been going up every year, and yeah, so it's a way to it gets used mostly by our heavy users, our regular readers, the folks who really want a particular book at a given time, and it keeps them in the library instead of in the bookstore.
I wanted to jump in with a question for you, Randall. This is Jean at Brooks. So I'm trying to understand what you're saying about the relationship between the CLN catalog and Clover. One of my concerns, we're really interested in maybe checking this out, but one of my concerns is that people would just choose their favorite place and go there all the time, and that if their favorite place became Clover, that could get complicated.
Yeah, staff, from the staff interface, we can say, I want this particular copy of this particular book. But patrons just put a request in, and if there's 5 copies in Catamount, then the software decides which copy they're going to get. So patrons can request a given title. I really want to read the latest, whatever. But then the system decides who ships what copy where, which has its own issues, because for a while Rutland was the default, and no matter who ordered, if we had it, we shipped it, which resulted in us at one point shipping 9 bins worth of books in one day.
Yeah.
But we seem to have that solved. So the patron request only goes so far. They can't say, "Oh, I really like, Brooks always ships my books regularly, so I want Brooks to ship this book to me." We don't let them do that.
Got it. I guess maybe we'll have to talk, our 2 libraries sometimes, so we can glean some wisdom from you on this, because I'm not clear what happens if you just bypass the CLN catalog and go right to Clover. That's the piece I'm not understanding.
There is no connection between Clover and Catamount as far as the cataloguing is concerned. That's the one problem that I foresee. There's no way to force your patrons to always go into the Catamount catalogue first of all to check what's there before they go to Clover.
Right.
No control over that at all.
So it just has to be patron education stuff where with graphics and friendly, happy bookmarks and that sort of thing, I'm thinking, right?
That would probably help, but it would not solve it 100%, because they're still going to be like, oh, well, I have this Clover open already, so I'll just request through here. And the way that Clover is set up, especially for Catamount Library, since we assume patrons request through Catamount first, blocked lenders are set up for Catamount libraries, or they were when it was first set up, so that Catamount requests in Clover do not go to other Catamount libraries. So it would cause a whole other level of complication if the patrons were just going right to Clover and requesting. It wouldn't even go to other Catamount libraries. It would just bypass the entire feature altogether. So I can only imagine that would be a nightmare for the staffing. If there was a way to maybe export anything that doesn't get filled in Catamount to Clover for staff approval, that might streamline it. But as far as I know, there is no way to link those.
Do you think Autographics might have that ultimate capability? It's just not there yet. Do you have a sense of that?
I do not. I am working with them to get more layers of control over where your requests go, though, because I would ideally, a lot of libraries would like their request, if it's not filled by a courier library, to just stop and then staff can evaluate it again. And right now it doesn't do that unless you also use the blocked lender list. So I have put in requests for more options and staff control over that. But as far as I know, there is no way to link the two systems. I know that Iliad connects, and that's through the ISO. But as far as I know, there is no ISO that will connect Koha and Clover.
And I had a question that, sorry if we're getting too much into Catamount weeds here, but I'm Matt. I also work under Gene at Brooks. I saw in your intro and refresher video, April, the Clover feature for saying you already have this title, your library already has this title when somebody tries to place a request. I was wondering, does that work if another Catamount library has a copy but Brooks doesn't, or is it specific to Brooks as the quote unquote branch?
It is specific to Brooks.
Is that something that might be modifiable? Do you know? Because I think it treats, as far as Bywater is concerned, Catamount's really a multi-branch library, right? Effectively. So wouldn't it, in theory, look across the branches and say your library being CLN already has a copy? Is that?
I can check with them and get more clarification and see if there's some setting that either they can put through or I can update to make sure that happens.
That could potentially, even if a patron starts at Clover first when they should look in Catamount, which we would all try to tell them, but we get paper requests for ILLs today where Catamount has a copy all the time, but that might at least give them, and of course I know that the matching isn't perfect, right, because of all those issues you're already discussing, but still, at least in some cases, it might give them that you don't really want to do this sort of flag on their screen.
I will put in a ticket and ask them.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Any other questions or any other patron initiated discussion? I will get, if anyone has any of the marketing or how-to materials that they use with their patrons, if you send them to me, I'll make sure they go out with the summary and the recording.
Actually, I had one more kind of question I wanted to throw out to the group, which is for those who are using patron-initiated holds, what's the argument to your management about why this is a good thing? Is it about patron service? Is it because the patrons want it? Is it because it streamlines things for staff? What's the key idea there? If anybody wants to.
I would say patrons want it, use it, and it's been very useful during COVID as well. So.
Okay.
I had kind of a similar sort of, or, take on that too, which was, a lot of the things that I've heard mentioned as possible drawbacks, right? Patron putting in requests when it should go to a suggestion for purchase, or, we already have a copy or what have you. It seems like those are problems we have to deal with anyway right now with either paper forms or a web, or email request, right? And it's just, to some degree, do you find that it's just, the same problems with a different initiation? Is it taking more staff time to weed through those and find those bad requests, or is it sort of comparable in just another place?
Well, I'm less concerned about the bad requests than the good requests. I was on the desk yesterday and the day before, and each day I had a person come up who is a series reader, and they both had big, long lists of books. And one is comfortable with our computer system, and they had 7 titles they wanted, and they ordered 6 of them themselves in Catamount. That left me handling one request, and it was actually for a book that is still new, and so it won't go through the interlibrary loan. And so it was a purchase request. And the other person doesn't like computers, and so he came up with a similar length book, and I had to grind through that entire list myself sitting on the desk. So for me, the time, not only do patrons like it, but from a staff standpoint, the staff savings in staff time on not having to manually handle what can be easily automated, I just don't get it.
So you've found it a savings of staff time?
Yes.
Oh, enormous. Yes.
Right, because I think, my suggestion, my guess would be, before you had patron-initiated holds, those 2 patrons would both have come up with the list of 7 books, and you would have had to do all 14 of them, right? As opposed to, so now you still had to do 7 for one who's just not interested or able to get educated on Clover. But the other patron who was and was happy to, they got 6 of them out of your hands. Yeah.
And McKenna has said, yes, we have one patron who is a heavy user of patron-initiated requests, and it really saves us time by allowing them to do that.
Right. Thanks for chiming in, everybody. Appreciate that.
Does anyone have any limits on requests?
At Ilsley, I have one particular patron who she comes in literally with multiple pages of typed out titles. And first she searches our catalog, and then she interlibrary loans whatever is on her list. And she has a card for herself, her husband, their child, and her mother-in-law, and she has stacks of paper lists for each of these people. It's insane. And she, in my opinion, requests too many, but because in our library we don't have any limits on how many books you can take out, the decision was made that we would not limit the number of interlibrary loans you can place, requests you can ask for. So I'm actually a little curious how you all think about this. And the reality for me is she's the only person who does it. Everybody else is completely reasonable. So for us, the idea of making a policy based on one patron who's a little annoying seemed a little odd.
We do not have limits. I think if I had someone who came in with pages and pages, we probably would. But so far, I don't think I've ever had a state employee ask for more than 3 at a time. And Adrian's not here, but I think St. J, it's either 3 or 5 that they limit a patron to at a time. And Denise says Heartland does not limit checkouts of Heartland items, but we limit to 5 interlibrary loans at one time.
And Rutland, typically we limit it to 3, but to a certain extent, it depends on the patron. The one who was in the other day, he's been a regular patron since he was 11. He's 18 now. He's a heavy reader, and he's not going to stack up 50 or 60 books at home. So if we see somebody who's overusing specifically the patron request, we'll just put a limit on their account, and they have to come in and talk to us to unlock the account, because you don't want a patron with 50 books sitting at home. Sooner or later, it's going to be a problem. So that's kind of how we do it. Is we just, when we see somebody, the system flags people who are, if you have 50 books suddenly come overdue, my search staff is going to see it, and they'll step in and make that not happen. But we do try to limit most often to 3.
We have limits for both in-person, in-library items and for interlibrary loan. And it differs for community members versus student, staff, and faculty. We do not do interlibrary loan for community members, just student, staff, and faculty.
In Bennington, we limit to 5 ILLs a week. And then we have sort of soft limits on other people who only read 1 book in a month, and so they only get to put 1 ILL on at a time. They have to read it, return it, and then we'll put the next one on. The habitual late returners of things. So we just don't let them go above the 1.
I have to say I'm lucky with my problem patron. She is also very good at keeping track of her stuff and getting it back on time. I would say at any given moment, she has between 7 and 10 interlibrary loan requests per card in her family. But I think I've only had to in the last 2 years, I would say I've only contacted her twice about something that was, I got the notice from one of you saying, hey, where's my book? And when I contacted her, she said, oh gosh, yep, I just found it. It was in the couch cushion. And, brings it right immediately back. So that's the other piece of it, I guess, that makes us reluctant to limit her or anybody. But it's interesting that you all 3 to 5 was standard. I'm going to take that back to my next staff meeting and see if I can cut this person off at the knees.
This is Lisa Norwich. We also don't have real policy limits. But I liked Wendy's term. We do also have some soft limits, and often I'll take it up with individual patrons if they're asking for very many things. We realized also that there's a difference between the person who wants to ask for 10 graphic novels for their middle schooler, which they're going to just zip through, and the person who might want 10 audiobooks where they're not going to get through them. So sometimes it's just, I've just had to have a conversation with patrons and say, this is the approximate length of time you'll have these items. How many do you really think you can get through? I think our Koha is set up to allow them to have 10 ILLs checked out at once, and very few people have ever come up to that limit. So.
In Rockingham, we used to have a limit of 3, and I never liked it. I never understood it. And then we kind of just stopped doing it during the pandemic, and I don't think we'll go back to it. We have a lot of rapid readers, and they're in a series, and they don't want to wait another 3 weeks for their next book. So I think we encourage them to ask for what they want. And we haven't had any abuses in general. Again, we might occasionally have the patron where you really have to talk to them about how long they've had something, and But that's where I really like the librarian patron connection and, you know, talking to people and working things out. I think that's important, which I think is one of the reasons we haven't so far got enthusiastic about doing the patron direct requests. But
at Arvin, we don't have a like a set limit policy on the ILLs at this point. And I find that it's mainly homeschooling families. So say the mom or the dad is requesting books for their kids. And so that's when we might get, you know, like 10 books at items at a time. Otherwise, and the other thing we do is if we know a patron, and sometimes people call us with ILL requests, and or they hand you the list. And if it's a long list, staff usually asks the patron, you know, how many of these do you want at a time? Like if they're reading a series, you know, so we know ahead of time and, you know, request that way.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. This has been very informative and very nice. Did anyone have any other follow-ups on patron-initiated requests? Or any other questions?
April, I have a question, Denise and Heartland. We switched over to using Aspen instead of OPAC. Do you know if Aspen at some point will be adding the, you know, where they can request an interlibrary loan through Aspen?
Aspen is a front end to Koha. It has nothing to do with placing holds or anything like that. And
Right. I guess I'm asking if right now they, you know, obviously have a place hold button. Do you know if Aspen, have you worked with Aspen at all? Do you know if they're thinking or if they would be adding any kind of a, you know, a similar request an interlibrary loan through Aspen? Do you know?
So as far as I know,
it would then come to staff, you know, just like.
I can speak to that. There is a place in Aspen that if you go into the admin, it shows up at the bottom of the page and it says, can't find this book, place a request, and you can put any URL you want. You can just make it a Google form and have them fill out the Google form, or you can send them right to your Clover Jump page. Yeah. If you tune in on Tuesday morning with Addie, we're still doing Aspen workshops Tuesday mornings at 9 o'clock, and you can ask her exactly how to find that and how to deal with that.
Great, thank you so much.
So I don't have Aspen. I just want to make sure the place hold button does show up in Aspen for inter-consortial lending, right?
It works for, it depends how it's set up. I think that like the home card libraries have it set up so that it works amongst them. But, you know, for Peachum, which is sort of a standalone, it will only allow you to place a hold on Peachum items.
Right.
I have some questions about, this is Matt from Brooks again. I have some questions about how, if you turn on SIP2, kind of how that ends up working, what you see. But I don't know if we want to drag everybody into that, or if that's something I should maybe talk with you, April, you know, one-on-one about. What do you think?
I could give a quick overview of what you would see that's different. So the biggest difference with SIP2 is that if you do not have SIP2 enabled and you're not doing patron-initiated requests, when you click on the request button, it just brings you the request form. If you have SIP2, it adds in the extra level of look up the patron, click on the patron, and then the same request form shows up, but with all the patron information pre-populated. But I do have test libraries set up. So if you wanted to have a separate meeting, I can screen share and show you some of that also.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think, you know, we're certainly interested in terms of not having to populate some patron information, which then gets out of date, of course, and everything, right? As a first step. Also, as a possible, you know, that like I think you mentioned, it's a good step towards patron-initiated holds if we decided we wanted to go there. But I gather there's also the possibility for the information, some of the information to flow the other way. Am I right about that? Where when a request has been made in Clover, things can show up in Koha? Did I make that up, or?
It does not. It only
Okay.
goes one way. It pulls in the patron information, but it does not send it to the ILS.
So there isn't you've marked it as arrived and checked out in Clover, and that somehow magically shows up in the patron record. I mean, that's probably just as well in many ways, but.
You can set up patron notifications so that they get an email when it arrives. So that works for some libraries. It doesn't work for others because some people mark it received, and that's when the patron gets a notice, but they still have to do their internal processing. So, you know, 2 minutes after it's checked in, after it comes out of the courier bin, the patron is at the desk saying, "Where's my book?"
Yeah.
And some people can just hand it over, and some libraries it's, you know, 3 rooms away and still being processed. So you could set up patron notifications that way. And what's nice about that, if you have SIP2, it pulls their email in from their patron record in Koha or whatever your ILS is. Not sure if there is no way to send the information from Clover into Koha. And to streamline the creating a record in our ILS, I actually just use the barcode for the request. So every barcode for an interlibrary loan is either this short Clover number or a much longer OCLC number, which coincidentally also helps me track which system I have borrowed it from when it comes back. So
that makes sense. But I mean, I think, Jean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we also enter some stub information about the item too, right? As well as using the barcode, right?
Yeah,
the title and that sort of thing.
We just make a very brief record in Koha. And so barcode and like a couple words of the title and a little code we use to designate its format, and then author last name.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And if other libraries are doing the same thing, it's still a manual process of creating those stub records, I'm assuming.
Yes. But another thing you can do if you're using SIP2, and even if you're not doing patron initiated, it will pull in their information and it makes tracking their requests in Clover a little more easy because you could just search specifically for that patron by barcode or name.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, definitely the idea of having to enter in that patron information, and like I said, you know, then it gets out of date and all that sort of things is definitely something we'd love to be able to avoid. So thank you very much for that. Yeah.
All right. Well, we do still have an hour, and I didn't know if there were any other interlibrary loan topics anyone wanted to bring up. That was a really good and focused discussion. That was good. So let me know if anyone has more interlibrary loan questions or anything else they want to talk about with the group. And if not, I will get to work on typing up the notes and getting the recording posted. All right. So our next meeting is in February. And let me look at the calendar.
Could I take a moment to have Jen wave at the camera? So this is Jean at Brooks. This is Jen Robb, who is our third Jennifer, joining a long tradition of highly competent and wonderful Jennifers in interlibrary loan. Jen just started, and I can promise that interlibrary loan through Brooks is going to show a little more oversight than it has in the last, say, month and a half when I've been kind of filling in. And I thank everybody for your patience, but we're excited to kind of be moving forward in ILL at Brooks. So.
Oh, well, hi.
Hi, nice to meet everybody.
Welcome. And I have a message from Tenzin. They were running into trouble with people trying to request discussion kits from Fletcher Free, and it was a setting in Clover, and that has been fixed. So if you have had book discussion sets from Fletcher Free that you've been trying to request, and they were just skipping Fletcher, those should go through now. Okay, and I was going to look at February. And I think at the last meeting, everyone agreed that Thursdays work pretty well for these meetings. So it would be in the morning next time. So how about Thursday, February 3rd, 10 to noon? Okay, and I had one person send me a possible topic for that meeting. They were wondering about interlibrary loan statistics and the trends pre and post COVID, and if there's been changes, because I don't know if it's statewide, but overall numbers for Clover have shown that September was much higher requesting than in previous years, and October has been strangely low requesting for a lot of people. I gauge it both on the numbers and the number of people who emailed me and said, is something broken because we're not getting that many requests? So I thought that would be like just the general flow and statistics and how they compare pre and post COVID are. So we may have that as a topic. I will, if anyone has other possible topics they would like to discuss at a future meeting, just email them over, and I don't just throw them in a hat and pull one out, but if I have enough, I might do that. So let me know. And thank you everyone for coming today. This was great.
Thank you.